The following radio program is for informational purposes only and is neither specific nor tailored financial advice to any individual. It is not intended as an offer or solicitation for the purchase or sale of any financial instrument. Always do your own due diligence and consult a financial advisor before making any investments. Investing involves risk, which can result in the loss of any or all principal. Peter Weitz is a registered investment advisor with Fusion Analytics Investment Partners, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor, as well as a registered rep with Fusion Analytics Securities, LLC, a FINRA-registered broker-dealer and SIPC member. All views expressed in this program are those of the host or guests and do not reflect the opinions of Fusion Analytics Investment Partners nor its affiliates. Your investments. How secure are you that they are secure? Do you want to know more about investing, retirement, and moving to the next level in business? Welcome to In Black and Whites, featuring host Peter Weitz. Our program will answer all of the questions about your future and so much more. It's all about smart business and smarter investing. Now, here is your host, Peter Weitz.
Hi, good morning. Thanks, and welcome back to the program. I am your host, Peter Weitz. And I want to thank Stuart Baker and his team at Steptoe & Johnson for joining me last week. In case you missed it, you can certainly download it off the iTunes library, but Stuart was the former general counsel of the National Security Agency, and he talked at length about data breaches and how you can avoid them, and it was definitely a worthwhile show. This week, I'm going to have a special guest who's been on the show before, and as a brief introduction for those that don't remember, and I guess it's been about a year ago that this story broke, but Chip Starnes, who is a local Florida businessman, was held hostage in his factory in China after getting into a labor dispute. And it made national headlines. It actually made world headlines. In fact, the Wall Street Journal ranked it as one of the top 10 business stories of the year for 2013. But Chip was on the show back in February, and he was talking about his ordeal. And what ended up happening was he moved his factory from China to India, to Mumbai. And we were sort of in the transition period at that time when he was on the show prior. We're in that transition period of him moving the factory. But I want to fast forward 6 months later and talk to Chip about the differences in doing business in China versus doing business in India. So I'd like to welcome back Chip Starnes to the program.
Morning, Chip. Good morning. Morning, Peter. How are you? Thanks for having me back.
No problem. So when we were finishing up, and we were talking the last time, Chip, and I just want to finish up on this.
Sure.
We were sort of at the end of what happened to you being held captive in China, and you had negotiated a deal with the Chinese government to get out, and then what happened?
Yeah, so China's very interesting. You're sort of, and I say you're sort of free to do what you want there. Still to this day, I said, us going into China, even what happened to us and everything that was lost, was still one of the best decisions that we had ever made. It was a great place to do business, but and it treated us very well for almost the 12 years that we were there. But unfortunately, when the economy started to change, we talked before about the squeeze on the currency, the loss of 27%, and the out of control and labor rates and social insurances, and when you're dealing with a commodity item like we are, that starts to get squeezed real quick, and it was either sink or make some business decisions to move elsewhere, and that's what we did. But when we had basically, I mentioned before, we had two divisions, a plastics division and we had a wet division. And we were in the process of moving the plastics division. It was the largest part of the business and took up about 70% of our labor force. Couldn't find enough people to even staff it anymore. So we're in the process of packing that up, moving it out. And during that, there was a bad rumor that started to float around that we weren't only moving the plastics division, but we were moving what we call our wet division, which is the alcohol prep pads and stuff. And that's when all the confusion took place. And basically, they all internally got together, 200-plus people. This was employees. These were family members. These were neighbors, and the outside surrounding villages came in and basically put the thing on shutdown. And that's where I got held for 7 days. Now, as you know, the local government, and I negotiated with the local labor union there, the leader, And their only objective wasn't to try to protect the business, wasn't to try to protect the businesses that we were doing business with, our vendors, or even try to protect the jobs themselves. It was simply to try to take care and quiet the people and the employees to make everybody go home. And basically, we were on shutdown, or I was on hold and complete shutdown until we agreed on a payment, and that all the workers agreed to, in essence, to buy them out. Like the whole business was leaving. And that's what happened at that point. We reached a number. It was close to, not counting all the other fees and monies and attorney fees and everything, it was close to about $500,000. And that got wired into a government account. And I'm assuming that it got dispersed from the government account out to the people. I really don't know what happened to it after that. But that's what actually got me released at about 6:30 or 7:30 in the morning on about the 7th day of being held.
And then the plan was then at that point you're now going to take all of your equipment and machinery and so forth and put it on containers and ship it to India, but that never happened.
Yeah, and that never happened. That's really, where a lot of questions, as you said, there's a lot of coverage around this situation. I know it happens quite commonly, more than we hear about, of these types of situations and factory owners or managers being held. But yeah, so that's what happened. A lot of people are asking, so what are you going to do? Are you going to go back in? But what people don't know in China, and this is what's different versus other parts of the world, talking about U.S., where we're in India now, our vendors got real nervous about the 4th or the 5th day. They could see, because it was being nationally televised within China itself, and they could see the standoff that was taking place. They started getting real nervous about their receivables. So we have a lot of vendors that we buy raw materials from, or had, to make product. And we, obviously they extend credit, and we owed them a lot of money. Our customers here in the U.S., we extend credit. They owe us a lot of money. And so what happened? They got real nervous because they knew if the payout was going to be made, that most of these village people, they had been with us for 7 to 10 years. They were getting very sizable checks for China and being with the company for so long that they knew that they would not come back to work. And that's exactly what happened. We had about 220 or 30 that were there. 10 people came back the next day after the payout was made. Right after that, the vendors filed suit against the company. And this is where it gets interesting. In China, if that happens, they actually just freeze your bank account. So you have no operation at all. You cannot send money in. You cannot take money out until the dispute is dissolved. And unfortunately, it wasn't one vendor. It was the nonwoven. It was the alcohol vendor. It was the paper vendors, the packaging vendors, and it went on and on and on and on. And our attorneys told us basically that to settle that and clean all that up would be probably close to a 2+ year time commitment. And if I wasn't to get on the plane, they would. Usually in situations like that, they would take your passport and you're forced to stay in China, and they, in essence, keep you there until the situation is rectified. Yeah,
and so essentially, you just had to leave because there was nothing that was going to happen.
Yeah, so then it came down to just a simple business decision. Do we go and we invest another 2 or 3 years and we lose our market and our relationships that we have currently, or do we just let the whole entire have to walk away from the whole entire facility, let them liquidate the assets, and then pass out whatever's left to luckily all the employees and all of them were paid, so the next tier to be paid would be vendors. And unfortunately, it really is sad because it hurt us personally and our business. We lost our business. We lost 12 to 14 years of building something and our assets, as well as it hurt a lot of the small vendors in China too. But when all this was going on, the local government, the local agencies, the police, or anybody, no one gave any concern about the small people in us in that whole entire process. So.
Yeah, and I remember when. I remember you came back to the States. Obviously, it was a big media story, and we met you at the airport when you landed. But now all of a sudden, you have to pick the pieces up from your business, and you've got to go think about what are you going to do? And India became a choice prior to this ordeal in China But talk about the next step of what happened when you worked your way towards India.
Yeah, so, we had already started preparing 9 to 12 months before this particular event took place. And, we looked at Laos, we looked at Vietnam, we looked at India, we researched next where we could actually go and deploy some capital and, get a facility where we could start to move the plastic equipment. We ultimately decided on India. Vietnam's a very popular name floating around in the international business community right now, but Vietnam is. And for Vietnam, came down between Vietnam and India. But Vietnam, a couple things had us concerned. One was only a population of about 90 million people, 90 to 100 million. And they are 100% dependent upon importing all of the raw materials and stuff. And, as we all know, that there's a lot of industry that's moving in there right now, and it won't take long for a lot of that excess labor that's available now to be used up. So we decided to move into India. From a financial standpoint, India looked good. From the cost of labor, direct labor. 85% of everything we're using is direct labor. Most of our processes and machinery control it, but 85% labor, 15% would be what I call our professional staff, which would be microbiologists to QA people and upper management, etc. All that looked great too, even compared, rates and stuff to China. On the exchange rate, the dollar was very strong against the rupee, versus what we had experienced over the previous 4, 5, 6 years and the loss on the currency of the renminbi. Everything was lined up. And property is very expensive in Mumbai. We're actually in the Mumbai area. So, from a budget standpoint and laying everything out, that looked great. Also, a gentleman, his name's actually Mike Mehta. He's been with us for about 12 years. He was born and raised in Mumbai, hasn't lived there for over 25 years, but still had connections and family there. So, that was a little bit of an intangible plus that helped us through some relationships. And so we had gone into India, and we found a place, and we started moving forward on that process to move the plastics and get things set up in India.
And that's interesting. And when we come back from the break, Chip, we're going to talk about the differences between India and China and what your experience over the last 6 months working in Mumbai has been like. We're going to do that in just a minute. You're listening to the In Black and White's radio program on the Voice America Business Network.
When it comes to business, you'll find the experts here. Voice America Business Network.
ERISA 408B2, fiduciary standards, safe harbor, fidelity bonds, record keepers, discrimination testing. I am so confused.
Does your 401k plan have more questions than answers? Peter Weitz and his team of 401k experts have a solution. Their on-site service model distinguishes them from other service providers, and they are specialists in 401k costs, regulations, and compliance. If your 401k plan has more questions than answers, then contact Peter at 877-945-2888 or email him at peter@inblackandwhites.com.
Climbing Mount Everest is an amazing feat, and many have died trying to do so. However, more people have died descending Mount Everest than in reaching the summit. Part of the problem may be that people are so focused on reaching their objective that they fail to plan appropriately for what they will do or should be prepared for afterward. Similarly, people are so focused on saving for retirement and reaching retirement that they fail to plan appropriately for what they will encounter once they have actually retired. With 1 out of every 4 65-year-olds today living past the age of 90, you may be retired longer than you are actually working. Have you devised a plan, process, and discipline to ensure that you will not run out of money? If you are not sure what to do, then simply contact Peter Weitz and his retirement team at Fusion Analytics. We help manage human emotions using 3 proprietary investment techniques. Our job is to evaluate the forces that the typical investor can't see so that wealth is preserved and not lost. Find out more at inblackandwhites.com. Weitz is spelled W-E-I-T-Z. Email Peter at inblackandwhites.com. In Black and Whites, we win by not losing.
When it comes to business, you'll find the experts here. Voice America Business Network.
You are listening to In Black and Whites. To reach Peter Weitz or his guest today, please call 1-866-472-5790. That's 1-866-472-5790. You may also send an email to peter@inblackandwhites.com. Weitz is spelled W-E-I-T-Z. Email Peter at inblackandwhites.com. Now, back to this week's program.
Hi, thanks. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Peter Weitz. We're joined today by American businessman and former hostage in China, Chip Starnes. And we've kind of finished up the hostage piece of our discussion, and we want to focus more on the differences and the nuances between doing business in China, which has been cachet for so long, and doing business in India, which is apparently going to become the new China. So Chip was telling us prior to the break about the decisions and why they picked India over some other countries, Vietnam being one of them. And he sets up shop in India. But Chip, start me out with this question. From a aesthetic and health standpoint, what are the differences between China and India? And I've been to China, and I know that it's not exactly a utopia by any stretch.
Right. You have been to China. You and I spoke about that, and I spent an awful lot of time in China. And about a couple of years ago when I first went to India, it really is, even from somebody that's been all over the world and spent vast amount of times in various countries. It actually took me 3 to 5 days to just mentally adjust, just to the surroundings. You have so many extremes there, from very, very rich, and then all the way down to the extreme poor, and just the worst type of conditions that you can absolutely imagine. When I was there, I was trying to keep that in mind when I first went into China about 15 years ago. You get on the outside, and there's villages, and and they all kind of pile together, but they create villages and stuff like that. But in India, you have the poverty, you have the almost similar populations. But you don't have what I would say the organization near the organization as you do in China, and versus what you're missing in India. So,
and that's so. Now you go down to India, and what's the what are you seeing as the differences in the worker and the workforce versus China? I mean, I'd imagine first it's the language difference.
Well, language, you think of it, they do speak English, and everybody can do basic reading and writing, but still the communication is difficult. When you get down, some of your upper management, they primarily speak Hindi, okay? And then, yes, they're all trained and they study English when they're young, but it's still, even the people, a lot of them that you hire, English, they speak the old English, so even basic communication is still difficult. With that, the biggest thing, so that's difficult still. The other biggest thing was, just the differences between India itself and the infrastructure. Infrastructure is a big issue there. There's not a lot of investment in infrastructure. China's been investing a lot of money in highways and, water piping and, developing. There, India's still a long ways away from that. I would have to guess they're probably close to 20 years behind China right now in those areas. But one of the other big differences was it's a country that's greatly driven by religion. And this is probably one of the things that we knew that it was Hindi and they're very, very religious. But probably one of the things when we were doing our initial due diligence on, which country to go into, we might have left this one out a little bit. But, the man is primarily the dominant force there, and that's basically dictated by religion. So even from your labor standpoint, from the top all the way down, you go into any of these organizations and companies, it's 95% men. I'm not saying that there's no women. We have a lot of women from chemists and working in the HR and purchasing departments and stuff like that. But a big difference between specifically China and India is that China workforce was 95% all women when we were in China, fantastic, good workers. But over in India, you're looking at 95% all male. So that's been a big difference for us.
And you find that they're not as good a worker as they were in China?
We're still in the process. We've invested a little bit more in technology, so we've taken out a lot of the labor dependency in some of our processes currently today. But I think, in general, if I had to compare the woman workforce that we had in China versus what we have today in India, it would definitely be probably 2 to 1 in terms of output, productivity, and get ability to get things done. So now we're still at the beginning stages, versus where we are. That was a very educated force that we had kept on a long time, that we had developed the culture and knowing how to do things over 10 or 12 years. We're still in the infancy stages of this. We do have products online, making products and stuff right now, but yes, there is definitely a difference in productivity and getting things done on a quicker time frame versus India.
And have you started? You've been manufacturing now. I'm assuming you're back in business, shipping product back to your customers here.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we've got plastics, standard blood lancettes. We're up and running. We've invested heavily there into full robotics. We were up and running and got our clean rooms done and making sterile alcohol prep pads, getting ready to have iodines and other types of products getting ready to come online. We are manufacturing and shipping and all over the world currently into the U.S. and other countries. So we've been up and running. We've been manufacturing since about January, February of this year, up and running.
And how do you compare the government in India versus, say, working with the government in China?
Yeah, so and I have to say this is the number one factor that they. How do I say this? Be politically correct about it, but obviously it's the largest democratic country in the world, India, with a population estimated at 1.34, who knows, 5 billion. It's hard. Or I'm sure we'd all agree it's hard for either China or anyone in India to pinpoint the exact numbers, but it's vast. The thing about India is, and I don't know if you know, and this has a lot to do with the infrastructures and, basically a daily chaos that takes place in India. Only 4 to 5% even pay income tax in India. And as you know, corruption, everybody, that's not a term that none of us in the business community are unfamiliar with. In terms of India, there is a lot of corruption in India. In fact, it was the only country, if you remember, that wasn't allowed to participate in this past Olympics that just came up, because even the Olympic Committee got, sodded for not doing their budget and stuff correctly. But with that being said, all that rolls downhill. So that's starting at the top with the government. You don't have a cash flow that's coming in that the government could depend on. No, they're going to get every year, like we all do our taxes every single year. That they can put plans for infrastructure development and stuff. They don't know what that is. And so what happens is they can't pay their government officials that much. And then it goes all the way down the line. And so the word corruption comes in, and it's vast, and it's an infestation of that's taken place. Now, we're all happy to hear about Modi, who's the new president that just came into India. We've even from a personal standpoint have seen already big improvements in terms of getting things done. But every step of the way in India versus China, we didn't, believe it or not, didn't have any of that taking place. We did dinners and we did various things like that. But over here, every step of the process at every single level, there's somebody out there with their hand out in order to get something done. And that's actually a killer to the whole entire process itself and trying to run a big organization there.
And so obviously, I guess the political question I want to ask, and I guess the answer is if everyone does it, is it really corruption? I mean, it just seems to me that's how you have to do business there.
I think, obviously they're extremely intelligent in India. I think it's been an acceptable practice for so long that you're right. I think it's just part of doing business. And it also works both ways. One, it's a hindrance. okay? And two, a lot of times if it's also it's acceptable to where you do pay. If something's not exactly right, they can look the other way and get it done for you. So, it's a give and take. It hurts the process, and at the same time, if something's done, they can also help the process as well. So it's so embedded and intertwined into the system there. You're right. Is it right or is it wrong? I think that it's just the way it's been done for so long that that's just the way that it's done. And you'll hear a lot of companies that are coming in that because of that, one of the biggest issues is, we put together budgets, our management will be held accountable for implementing these budgets and keeping time frames and customers' orders and, getting certain certifications and whatever it is for your organization and what you do. But with all these handouts and various agencies and people that you have to deal with individually all the way through the process really cause things to take probably 3, 4, if not sometimes 5 times longer versus what we experienced in China.
And so you've got to factor, is that going to be a recurring situation? So you have to factor that in as orders come in to fulfill?
Yeah, it's one of those things that obviously there was a lot of initial upstart things. You need various certificates and licensings for setting up businesses anywhere, be in India or there. But just that process alone could take 4 times longer to do it in India. A lot of barriers to entries and a lot of relationships that have to be done and a lot of, under the table type of things need to be done in order to get your piece of paper stamped to get approved. That's just the way it's done. In terms of the ongoing daily activity of running a business there, yes, all that has to be factored in. So, if we would normally in China, we would tell a customer that the 90-day lead time from when we got your order until when we could deliver it to you would be 90 days. Now, we're saying, hey, we need the 120-day lead time. We need an extra 30 or 40 days because there's more bureaucracy, there's more red tape, there's more sign-offs and processes that have to have stamps or either signatures to move a good from point A to point B.
Yeah, and I want to follow up on that a little more, Chip. I got a couple questions on that regard, but we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a minute. You're listening to the In Black and White's program on the Voice America Business Network.
From the boardroom to you, Voice America Business Network.
Climbing Mount Everest is an amazing feat, and many have died trying to do so. However, more people have died descending Mount Everest than in reaching the summit. Part of the problem may be that people are so focused on reaching their objective that they fail to plan appropriately for what they will do or should be prepared for afterward. Similarly, people are so focused on saving for retirement and reaching retirement that they fail to plan appropriately for what they will encounter once they have actually retired. With 1 out of every 4 65-year-olds today living past the age of 90, you may be retired longer than you are actually working. Have you devised a plan, process, and discipline to ensure that you will not run out of money? If you are not sure what to do, then simply contact Peter Weitz and his retirement team at Fusion Analytics. We help manage human emotions using 3 proprietary investment techniques. Our job is to evaluate the forces that the typical investor can't see so that wealth is preserved and not lost. Find out more at inblackandwhites.com. Weitz is spelled W-E-I-T-Z. Email Peter at inblackandwhites.com. In Black and Whites, we win by not losing.
ERISA 408B2, fiduciary standards, safe harbor, fidelity bonds, record keepers, discrimination testing. I am so confused.
Does your 401k plan have more questions than answers? Peter Weitz and his team of 401k experts have a solution. Their on-site service model distinguishes them from other service providers, and they are specialists in 401k costs, regulations, and compliance. If your 401k plan has more questions than answers, then contact Peter at 877-945-2888 or email him at peter@inblackandwhites.com.
Voice America Business Network, the bottom line in business.
You are listening to In Black and Whites. To reach Peter Weitz or his guest today, please call 1-866-472-5790. That's 1-866-472-5790. You may also send an email to peter@inblackandwhites.com. Weitz is spelled W-E-I-T-Z. Email Peter at inblackandwhites.com. Now, back to this week's program.
Hi, thanks. Welcome back to the show. I am your host, Peter Weitz. Hey, make sure you follow me on Twitter. My handle is @PeterWeitz, or check out our blog, inblackandwhites.com. We're going to be posting all kinds of data and facts from today's guest. And I mentioned earlier, former hostage and American businessman Chip Starnes. And we were talking about the transition from China to India and doing business in India and the actual bureaucracy that takes place there. And as a result of the bureaucracy, the red tape, and having to deal with all the corruption and the payoffs. And so, you know, the two questions that sort of come to mind, Chip, and, you know, obviously we'll take on one at a time, is how does a large publicly traded company that does business in India account for having to deal with the corruption?
Oof. You know, I mean, I guess there's two ways. I mean, you go in there and just say that you're, account for the corruption. You know, Peter, that's a good question. I don't know. I only know from my personal experiences. I can tell you, but as you know, I don't know if you've ever heard of the company called Reliance. It's an extremely large organization. The gentleman that's the number one shareholder of it, I think he was ranked like the top 10, one of the richest gentlemen in the world. Sorry, his name escapes me right now, but he's in everything over there, from oil to communications to, I mean, you name it, to property all over India. Big. You know, they have the one company policy that says they won't pay or pay anyone to get a process or do anything like that. Now, they've held strong. Now, they're an extremely big organization. They're also an Indian organization. You talk about, outside companies that are coming in, and how do you control that and stuff. I think it's one of those things where you really can't control it, because in order to get it done, if you're coming in and you're investing capital just like us, it's part of the process. You know, you said a little while ago, is it, since it's been going on that long, is it something that's just accepted? Does that okay? I mean, I think for India, it is okay, and no one blinks an eye at it because it's just been done that way so long. But for foreigners that are coming in, and I still believe India is one of the biggest upsides and has one of the biggest opportunities of any country that's out there today, because they have an extremely educated population of people. You know, some of the smartest people in the world, especially in our sector, in the medical side and the sciences, as well as they have a vast labor pool of cheap labor that's out there that's readily available. But the problem is, how do you put those together? And then how do you build an organization with all the corruption to get it done in a time frame you need it done? And when you try to build something on any type of scale, every single little decision that needs to be made almost has to have approval from someone on the outside. And one of the things I've always said is that, you know, you don't go in and try to. When we're in China, I always said, let's not try to make China something that it's not. Let's try to figure out how to work within it and make it better and be the best of what we can be inside China. We're doing the same thing in India right now. You walk in our facility, you can tell there's an outside influence there, and the quality and the way we maintain things and stuff. But the issue with India, the number one thing that I've said, is it's outside external factors that you are not able to control that really, really hurt organization there. And that's one of the areas. What I mean by that is an approval process. You know, taking 2 weeks to negotiate a fee for that process or that rubber stamp that needs to be done in order to get that done. It's external factors that really, really hindrance the whole entire organization, the processes, and still to this day, I even think foreign investment to come into India. So I do think that will start to clean up over the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. But we're not there we're not there today just yet.
And do you think that there's no process in place, or is it every process is different for every company?
No, I think I think there's a lot of processes in place. You know, I mean, obviously they were British controlled for forever. and from taxations to stamping. And I think that process, they just sort of incorporated every single process and every single piece of paper that needs to be documented comes with only one person that actually controls the stamp, the one person that negotiates fees, and it just slows and bogs down the whole entire system, and it is epidemic at this point in time, for any organization, being small or big.
Right, and I can imagine that, all of a sudden now you're trying to get back in business. You go over to India, and you've got to figure out and navigate your way through this whole maze of mess. And I'm sure it's been completely frustrating.
Yeah, I mean it's been a mental adjustment compared to how we did business. You do it in business in the U.S. and then you do business in China, and you come to India. It's just done completely different. I'll give you an example. In China, we were set up as what's called a WOFE, a wholly owned foreign entity. And basically, in India, we're set up as something similar. It's called an EOU, an export-oriented unit. And what that means on both of these entities, one in China, one in India, is basically we're setting an organization up or a company up where most of the revenues and the things that are being manufactured will be exported outside the company. So, a government would look at us as job creation. So that's a really good thing. So, it's and so so what that allows us is we can actually import. We actually, believe it or not, a lot of our machinery and stuff we're bringing in from other countries, and because of our EOU export-oriented unit, we could bring those in tax-free because they're being specifically used to manufacture goods and export out at least 80% of the goods. Now, here's the big difference between China. I'll give you a specific. We were set up as a WOFE in China, but China lets you run your business, lets you be held accountable yourself to controlling what you can and can't do. For example, what they don't want you to do is import a raw material and not pay tax on it, then resell it into the industry where the government loses out on that. So, China, they would come in and they would audit every 6 to 9 months and take a look to make sure that, what you purchase and what you've exported all balances. But in India, okay, it's to the extreme. I mean, they're in there every single time we receive a shipment. The person from the excise tax department has to come. It cannot be touched, sign off on it. When that raw material gets turned into a good that needs to go out for sterilization, before it can ship from our facility 4 miles away for sterilization, that excise person or department has to come, sign off on it before it leaves the facility and goes back. When it comes back, before it's loaded on the container to go to port for shipping, we cannot load it on the container until the excise department comes back and signs off on it and goes to there. So that's just a small example, and what that creates is more people, more paperwork, more slowing down of the process of the business being able to scale, and just more red tape involved. Whereas China, we can make it, we could pack it on a container, send the whole container to the sterilization facility, and went from the sterilization facility right to the port. So everything, that's just one example of one process of a raw material that we have 4 or 5 different touches or steps or sign off approvals that need to take place just to get it from a raw material and get it to port and get it exported.
So do you feel like you've almost stepped back several years in your business from going to India versus the advancements that they had made in China?
No, I don't. I don't feel like we've stepped back. It's the step back is it's taken us longer to set up than we had originally anticipated because of a lot of the things we've been talking about. However, I think on a foregoing basis that you can also build those things into your budgets and your forecasting now too, understanding that this is the process, this is India, and to be successful, you need to work within these parameters within India. We're not going to change it. It's the external factors that we need to understand and get grips on. Does it require more labor, more people to handle these processes? To meet with, to handle the visitations and the people that have to come and inspect and sign off on the additional paperwork that's got to be done and supplied. Yes, but also, as entrepreneurs, as companies, and the business community making foreign investments. It's also one of those things you call barriers to entry. So any competitive market, especially a market like ours, I strongly believe, 12 to 18 months from now, we're in here now, and I'm speaking openly, and freely with you, Peter, and everybody else that's listening about, how frustrating it is because you get used to doing things one way. Change is difficult for anybody. But I also believe that once the models, we smooth flow, we understand how long it takes us to do something, we understand the processes, which we're already almost there at this point in time, that there's going to be a strong advantage because we will have the pickups on, the exchange, not the fluctuation of the currency. We do immediately have the pickups on the labor and the social insurance and stuff. We do have access to labor where we can scale a business, which is what we didn't have the ability to do in China. So I was thinking, getting through these barriers to entry is very difficult, very frustrating. We're luckily at not such a Fortune 500 company that we still have flexibility. We can be hands-on. We can understand the process, and we can put the things in place to where we can be successful. 12 to 18 months from now, I think we're going to be reaping the benefits and the fruit of that.
And that's definitely not the perspective I was thinking, so I thank you for that. I guess the question I have now, so now you've been going to China essentially almost full-time for the last 6 months. What's it like living there?
Yeah, I think you mean India, right?
India, sorry.
Yeah, it's that's been an adjustment too. 60 or 70% of the I'm not vegetarian, but 60 to 70% of the population is vegetarian. Again, that's religious driven, so that's fine. And just I'm in the Mumbai area, and there's just so many people. I mean, I think there's about 20. The Mumbai area is very small. It's actually a very small area. I think it's got about 20 or 22 million people in the Mumbai area. So, if you go out early in the morning or you go out late at night, it's what I say, it's sort of like if you've ever been to Las Vegas, there's no clocks on the wall anywhere. So it's sort of the same thing. You don't know what time of day it is. It's sort of walking out, same thing in Mumbai. You go out, there's just people and there's chaos all over. There's people walking, riding bikes and driving cars. And so, culturally, with just the sheer amount of population, not having the infrastructure in place, from a sanitary standpoint, we take advantage of services here. You have your trash picked up every 2 days a week. Over there, it's just all over the place. So there's not a lot of systems and stuff in place. Will that come in time? Absolutely, it will come in time. I'm a big believer in that. But so mentally adjustments there, getting from point A to point B is definitely difficult. But again, those are the advantages and the barriers to entry and going somewhere and doing something. I wouldn't say first, but doing something that a lot of people haven't gone in and do, especially in our industry.
And I'd imagine that, I'm guessing that they have open arms for an American businessman.
Yeah, they are. They're very respectful of foreigners and Americans coming in. I think there's a great working relationship there. There's a lot of respect between the two. We have a very, very educated and very experienced management and staff over there, not doing specifically with the goods and products that we're making, but anything from we do a lot of sterile type of products, a lot of labs and testing that needs to be done, and also injection molding. All of the professional trade there is there. The biggest thing is in China is everything sort of made in China. India, there's not a lot of mold makers in India. There are some. But if you versus China, it's like 100 to 1. So you have a lot of knowledgeable people, but they still outsourced and got all their molds from China and would bring them into India. So right now we're at the process of coming in and saying, hey, we need to make our own molds. So we need to be completely 100% vertically integrated in our organization, from controlling the design process. When we got a design, we make the molds ourselves internally. We make those investments. We do that. Or on the alcohol side, we make the investments. We make the foil paper. Then we put it on the machines, and it makes the final goods and products. So we control the whole process. So, that knowledge has not been there, but the education, the engineers and access and the ability to learn how to do it, to fully vertically integrate an organization is there. Will take a little bit of time.
Yeah, thanks. We're going to take a quick break, Chip, and we'll be back in just a minute. You're listening to the In Black and White's radio program on the Voice America Business Network.
Voice America Business Network, the bottom line in business.
ERISA 408B2, fiduciary standards, safe harbor, fidelity bonds, record keepers, discrimination testing. I am so confused.
Does your 401k plan have more questions than answers? Peter Weitz and his team of 401k experts have a solution. Their on-site service model distinguishes them from other service providers, and they are specialists in 401k costs, regulations, and compliance. If your 401k plan has more questions than answers, then contact Peter at 877-945-2888 or email him at peter@inblackandwhites.com.
Climbing Mount Everest is an amazing feat, and many have died trying to do so. However, more people have died descending Mount Everest than in reaching the summit. Part of the problem may be that people are so focused on reaching their objective that they fail to plan appropriately for what they will do or should be prepared for afterward. Similarly, people are so focused on saving for retirement and reaching retirement that they fail to plan appropriately for what they will encounter once they have actually retired. With 1 out of every 4 65-year-olds today living past the age of 90, you may be retired longer than you are actually working. Have you devised a plan, process, and discipline to ensure that you will not run out of money? If you are not sure what to do, then simply contact Peter Weitz and his retirement team at Fusion Analytics. We help manage human emotions using 3 proprietary investment techniques. Our job is to evaluate the forces that the typical investor can't see so that wealth is preserved and not lost. Find out more at inblackandwhites.com. Weitz is spelled W-E-I-T-Z. Email Peter at inblackandwhites.com. In Black and Whites, we win by not losing.
The business community's first choice in Internet Talk Radio. Voice America Business Network.
You are listening to In Black and Whites. To reach Peter Weitz or his guest today, please call 1-866-472-5790. That's 1-866-472-5790. You may also send an email to peter@inblackandwhites.com. Weitz is spelled W-E-I-T-Z. Email Peter at inblackandwhites.com. Now, back to this week's program.
So on the break, I was talking with our guest, Chip Starnes, the American businessman, former hostage in China, now businessman in India. And we were just talking a little bit about, sort of what the life is like in India. And essentially, Chip is a carnivore, not a vegetarian, which makes it very difficult to eat. And he was telling me that getting a steak or beef or pork is essentially impossible. Correct, Chip?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it right. I mean, possible is it's not readily available. Definitely anywhere. There's two, the beef and the pork, and the pork is just like even a lot of people here, it's looked upon as pretty much a dirty type of animal, and obviously on the other side is the cow, which is a religious symbol there, and therefore. Getting either of those types of, which what we would consider staples here, make it a little bit difficult trying to get that on a daily basis there.
Yeah, and actually, Chip, I was just checking my email, and again, for those that want to email me, peter@inblackandwhites.com. I did get an email from a listener that was curious, and I'm going to switch gears here, going back to China. When you were in your situation where you were held captive, what were you thinking about? What was going through your mind, and were you scared?
Yeah, the answer to that is 1,000%. And that's probably one of the things I haven't really spoke a lot about. But on the 5th day, one of the vendors got in, and it was one of our packaging suppliers, and actually they weren't letting even government, police, or anybody in except the one negotiator, which I mentioned earlier, which is the labor union person, the representative to handle between myself and all the workers. But one of the packaging suppliers that did got in, we'd owed him quite a bit of money. And just the night before, he had been threatened with his life to be killed, and his family, and got in on the fifth day into my office and had done the same thing to me. And starting the evening, and I actually just wrote him a check. I'm sure it never went through, but I wrote him a check out of the finance department. I had them do that because all of our accounts, the government had already frozen them at that time. But the scary thing that started happening, Peter, was that on the fifth day, I mentioned where all the vendors, they saw on TV that this was going on. They knew if they got paid, they wouldn't come back. That a lot of the vendors started showing up with a lot of the Chinese mafia. So you look outside the window, which obviously wasn't broadcasted or focused on a lot, but you saw the black Jettas and all the vendors that were out there with parts of the Chinese mafia there. So I went into almost a state of panic starting at the end of the fifth and sixth day, because psychologically it was almost safer to remain inside than I thought if I was to get grabbed or nabbed on the outside. If you've done anything or know anything about it, being held captive, that's bad. They're not letting you go. You're being held against your will. Yes, I was being threatened and, wouldn't be allowed to sleep and all those things go. But to be nabbed on the outside from commercial kidnapping, you can do some research on that. That goes to all extremes where, with vendors. So when I was able to get out of there, get thrown in the car, put into another car by my attorneys, and finally a third car, and got right to the airport, I was definitely looking over my shoulder the whole entire way. So the answer to that is absolutely 1,000%.
Yeah, so you changed cars 3 times on your ride from the factory to the airport.
Yeah, the first car was a government car, and then another car was I have 2 or 3 attorneys, and one went to an attorney car, and then finally about 10 miles out, went into a third car and got to went straight directly to the airport to get out of there. But absolutely that was going on, and it was staged to a big conference. I don't no one remembers. It's been about a year now, but they were scheduled to be a big conference about 8:30 in the morning, and about 45 minutes before that, they were putting everybody into one of the areas inside the factory, and they slipped me out through a government car. That was one of the things that we had negotiated. Once they received confirmation of the wire in the government account, that we even had to draw a contract up for this. This is the craziest thing ever. But in the contract, it said in there, upon receipt of the wire that was sent, they would make arrangements to safely remove me and get me out of the facility. At that point, they did that, and that's when the car jumped to another car, and all that was going on outside. So I was in a state of panic, that's for sure.
Yeah, so that was orchestrated by the Chinese government, not the American government.
Yeah, no, the American government, where they had their hands tied. China kind of laughed the whole thing off and just titled it as a domestic dispute. And I guess I don't know if there was some, international legalese or whatever it may have been, but because it got titled as a domestic dispute, it's supposed to be handled on its own. Even though, in most countries that wouldn't be allowed, but in China, that's kind of how they look at it. In China, you're free to do your business, stuff like that, but at the end of the day, if there's issues, you're pretty much by yourself to figure them out as well. That's why, on the commercial napping, if I would have got grabbed by any of these other big vendors out there that the company owed a lot of money to, that could have really been bad.
Last question: do you still feel like you have to look over your shoulder?
I'm feeling a little more comfortable now. Definitely for the first 6 or 7 weeks, I received a lot of threatening calls, a lot of emails, and even the one particular vendor was sending pictures of himself and his son and all that type of things. It's a different world over there. I'm feeling a little more comfortable because I think a lot of the companies they understand that that's business sometimes. You got to take the good with the bad, and at least that's how we've chalked it up. But I don't want to get too comfortable, and so I still do look, and I am a little cautious from time to time, but definitely feeling a little better about it.
And I appreciate that. I know that's a tough subject. Chip, thanks again for being on the program. I'm was real interesting to hear the differences between China and India and what you've got going on in India. And I know all the listeners here wish you the best of luck in continuing your business.
Thank you, Peter. My pleasure, and look forward to speaking to you soon.
You got it. Thanks. Next week, I got an interesting show. I'm going to have a certified master sommelier, and we're going to take a little bit of a different turn. We're going to talk about how you taste a wine and determine which one's good and bad on your palate. But again, thanks to Chip Starnes for being on the show. You're listening to the In Black and White's radio program on the Voice America Business Channel. Make it a great week.
Thank you again for tuning in to In Black and Whites. Please join your host, Peter Weitz, again next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time and 7 a.m. Pacific Time for another edition of the program on the Voice America Business Channel. Have a safe week.